Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is guard. Let's take a moment and review some of the definitions or the ways that we use this verb. The first way you might hear guard used can mean to watch over in order to protect or control something. Let's also look at the second definition of this verb. It's to watch over someone in order to prevent them from escaping. Many times, these first two definitions are used in connection to the military or police. Another area you might hear it is related to security. So anytime you're trying to prevent something bad from happening or preventing someone else to have control over an area, a situation, or another person, you might hear this verb used or see it used if it's in writing. A third way the verb guard gets used can mean to stay close to an opposing player in order to prevent or stop a really good shot or pass. This is most commonly used in the sport of basketball. And in fact, as I looked through many newspaper articles and instances where this verb was being used, I saw it used again and again in connection to the sport of basketball. Now, a fourth way you might hear guard used can mean to protect against damage or harm. There are different products and things that we regularly use to try and prevent some type of injury or damage to something that is important to us. We'll look at some example sentences a little bit later as we go through this video. For now, you should know that guard is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing, and that forms guarding. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by adding ed. Our base verb, guard, ends with a d sound. This means when I add the ed ending, I'm going to add an extra syllable to this verb. And the ed here is going to make a sound like this, id. That's what creates the extra syllable. So the past tense and participle forms of the verb should sound like this. Guarded, guarded. Okay. Now let's talk about two phrasal verbs that you might encounter. The first is to guard against. This can mean that someone is taking precautions or that they're trying to prevent something, make something stop, maybe before it happens. Let's take a look at an example sentence. Many people guarded against COVID by wearing masks. Maybe you were one of these people. You were taking this precaution. You were making sure you weren't breathing in other people's germs. So you were preventing catching this, or you were trying to stop it before it happened. Another phrasal verb you might encounter is to guard from. This can mean that someone or something is being protected, either from something that's dangerous or maybe some kind of threat, something that has kind of a bad or dangerous meaning to it. It could even be a person. An example of this might be, these cages should guard our plants from hungry deer. Maybe you've seen people do this, put up different things that try to protect the plants or allow plants to grow and not be eaten. So here the wild animals are kind of the dangerous or bad things, right? They're going to eat the food before we have a chance to do it. Now, let's move on and continue using our verb of the day in a couple different verb tenses. Today, we're going to practice the past progressive and the present perfect progressive. Now, the first thing I should note about both of these tenses is when you hear progressive, it might be a new word for some people. Many teachers, textbooks, and even other YouTube videos will use the word continuous. So you might hear these verb tenses called the past continuous or the present perfect continuous. That's just fine. It means exactly the same thing. I'll tell you why I use progressive in just a moment. But for now, let's talk about why we have the past progressive verb tense. We use this verb tense to describe an action that was ongoing during some point in the past. It might be for a time period, it might be for a length of time. Many times, as we have sentences in the past progressive, we're describing one action that was progressing or one action that was continuing, and that action gets interrupted by another action. That interrupting action is most commonly in the simple past tense. Now, here's why I like using the word progressive. I hope you can see in the name of the verb tense, you'll see they both start with P, past progressive. So when you see those two P's, remember you're going to need two parts to make your verb. We're going to use a past form of be, and then we're going to use the ing form of the verb. Okay? Let's talk about the past form of be. This is rather special. All other verbs, we just have one form of the past tense, but here our past tense verb is going to change based on what our subject is. So if our subject is I, he, she, or it, we'll use was, W-A-S. That's the first part of our verb, and then we use that ing form of the verb. But if our subject is you, we, or they, we're going to use were, W-E-R-E, and then the ing form of the verb. Let's take a look at an example sentence. He was guarding the superstar during the first half of the game. Okay. Here's a sentence that likely goes back to our sport of basketball, right? And this action, this one player, right, tried to prevent the superstar from catching a pass or taking a shot. Now let's talk about negative past progressive sentences to do this. Again, we start with our subject. We use the form of be that matches, so was or were, then not, and then the ing form the verb. Let's take a look at another example. They weren't guarding the livestock from predators. Okay, so here maybe we're talking about actions that were taken at night or taken when someone wasn't around. You can see here we've got a negative, so they weren't doing things to protect them from dangerous animals, other animals that might try and eat them. Okay? You can see here were not has been combined into one word, weren't. We can also do that with was not. We can combine it into the contraction wasn't. Now let's move on and talk about making some yes or no questions in the past progressive. To do this, you start with was or were, whichever form matches the subject. The subject comes next, and then you're going to see that ing form the verb. Here's another example. Was someone guarding the prisoners throughout the night? Right? So remember, trying to keep someone in a particular area, prevent them from escaping. Okay? That word someone is always treated as singular, even if someone's going to answer, yes, there were 2 or 3 people watching, protecting, and trying to prevent the prisoners from escaping. Now let's move on and talk about the present perfect progressive. We use this verb tense to talk about actions that started in the past and they continue into the present. They may even continue into the future. Many times we're using this verb tense to really focus on how long a particular action has been ongoing. Now, you'll remember just a moment ago I told you past progressive, 2 P's, you need 2 parts to your verb. Here we have present perfect progressive. So we have 3 P's. This should help you remember you're going to need 3 parts to make your verb. So all of our affirmative sentences are going to start with our subject. And if the subject is I, you, we, or they, our first part of the verb is have, H-A-V-E. Then we're going to use the participle been, B-E-E-N, right? And then the ing form the verb. But if our subject is he, she, or it, we use has, H-A-S, been, the participle, and then the ing form the verb. Let's take a look at an example sentence. The wildlife conservators have been guarding the birds at the wetland for 15 years. Okay, so wetlands, we're talking about an environment where there's a lot of water, a lot of moisture, and here again we're talking about protection, preventing maybe people from harming these particular birds. It could be other predators or other threats from the environment. Now let's move on and look at a negative present perfect progressive sentence. To do this, you start with a subject, you use have or has, whichever form matches that subject, then not, then the participle been, and then the ing form the verb. You may hear have not be combined into the contraction haven't, or has not combined into the contraction hasn't. Let's take a look at an example sentence. You haven't been guarding anybody all game. Okay? I saw a sentence very similar to this. And in fact, it was a coach talking to a particular player. And that coach was extremely frustrated, right? This coach was really suggesting to someone else, you haven't been preventing them from catching passes or making passes, maybe making other shots. So the coach here is being very critical with that sentence. Now let's move on and look at making a yes or no question in the present perfect progressive. To do this, again, we start with have or has, whichever form matches our subject. That subject comes next. Then the participle been, and then the ing form of the verb. Here's another example. Has the group been guarding their forest from timber smugglers for very long? Okay. Again, here's another sentence talking about protection or the prevention of something bad. And so this sentence I've borrowed from an article I was reading about a group of people, women in particular, that have been trying to protect a very special species of trees, one that doesn't grow everywhere, one that is very important to this particular culture of people, and there are others, right, trying to take it and sell it for a large profit, right? But this group of women have been guarding the trees, right? This has been an ongoing or continued action started in the past. It continues into the present, and it's probably going to continue into the future. Now let's move on and talk about some words that are related to our verb guard. And the first word we're going to discuss is just the noun form of this word. The noun guard can have a number of different meanings. We're going to talk about 3 more commonly used ones. So one way we use the noun guard is to talk about a person who keeps watch. And frequently this gets used with soldiers or others in the military. It might be used in connection to prisons or jails, but generally someone is given the job or they're assigned to watch who can access or who can get into a particular place, or they might have a job of protecting another person or thing. So you might hear someone use this to describe their job. He's been a guard for 10 years. Okay, so here we sort of know his job title. It's his job to watch access to a particular area or protect others. A second way the noun guard gets used is to talk about a device that is worn or placed in a particular area in order to prevent injury or damage. Okay. Let's use an example from soccer or what's known internationally as football. Okay. You might hear someone ask, did you buy new shin guards for the season? Right? This is commonly a piece of plastic, right, that protects one's legs from being kicked or maybe really hard shots or passes. It prevents bruising and other injuries on the front part of our bottom legs, our shins. Okay? Now, a third way to use the noun guard is to talk about a state of caution or maybe a state of preparedness where you're trying to prevent something bad from happening, or you're trying to maybe prevent some bad situations, bad events. So, an example of this: you have to keep your guard up while walking at night. Okay? Here, someone's encouraging you, be aware. What's around you? Who's around you? Where are you? Are you staying in lighted areas? Right? So they're asking you to maintain a level of caution. Another related word you might hear is the noun guardian. Sometimes we use this word very broadly to talk about someone who is a defender, a protector, or keeper of something. An example of this might be, she sees herself as the guardian of the organization's funds. Okay? So here we're talking about someone who's trying to protect, take good care of the organization's money. Right? So she might ask a lot of questions. How much are we spending on that? What are we doing? How much can we save if we do this? Right? So someone who's protecting maybe some limited funds. Now, a second way this noun guardian gets used is more common in legal matters. So this is someone who looks after and is legally responsible for another person. And it might be because that person is a child and they're not able to sort of take care of their own affairs. It could also be because someone has certain disabilities, and again, they're not able to make informed decisions to protect and take care of themselves. An example of this in a sentence might be, please ask your parent or guardian to sign the permission slip. This is something many teachers will say. Again, they're asking a child to talk to the adult that is responsible for their care. Another related word you might encounter is guarded, right? This might look like that past tense form of the verb we spoke about earlier in the video, but guarded can also be used as an adjective. When we use it as an adjective, many times we're describing someone who is cautious, maybe has some reservations, right? So they're not willing maybe to jump in, share a lot. They're kind of, I don't know about this, right? An example of this might be, he gave extremely guarded answers to our questions. I wonder why. Right? I feel like I've heard sentences like this as I watch crime-related shows and movies, right? Where maybe some detectives are kind of wondering, why wasn't that person willing to speak more openly or speak more freely with us, right? Kind of, what are they hiding? Another related word for us to talk about is the adverb guardedly. So now we're describing an action, or we're describing an adjective that is being done in a cautious way, or in a way that's rather careful not to give too much information. An example of this in a sentence might be, economists are guardedly optimistic on the country's economic outlook. Okay? So again, it might not be very enthusiastic, really boisterous, where they're saying, hey, don't worry, our economy is strong, right? They're going, things look okay, but make smart decisions. They might, again, not be this really loud, enthusiastic, and confident. They're a bit more cautious, or you might hear the word reserved. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.